An opening. Your defense is lacking. Leave this to me. the art of my forebears.
Focus. Release!
Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for Hell's Lid. This is one of 2 new instances made available by patch 4.2 in Final Fantasy XIV Rise of a New Sun. I've got a lava advice when it comes to this dungeon. So much so that I'm just crumbling under the magnitude of it all. My name is Miztech and I'll be your dungeon guide. After a few regular trash mobs, we jump down into this fiery trap where we face off against 4 Nurikabe. These will continuously cast fire on their primary target until they are destroyed. Tanks will need to grab enmity on each one individually, which can be a bit tricky as they are spaced a bit apart. Once all 4 are down, the road opens up to more trash mobs and another fiery wall. You can grab all of these and burn them down, but be careful. You'll notice a ton of AoE telegraphs constantly being thrown out around you, so watch your step. The first boss is Otake Maru. 100-ton swing will deal damage, knockback, and apply a vulnerability up debuff to any player hit. When you see this cast, make sure you're out of melee range. Periodically, you'll notice these circle telegraphs spawn around the platform. Large boulders will soon fall in these areas and should be avoided as necessary. 10-ton slash is a large frontal cone. The boss will turn towards the player and begin the cast, giving you time to get out of the way. Eventually, the boss will leap onto a player, throw his weapons up into the air, and mark them for prey. He will begin to vomit lava while slowly following the affected player. Be sure to move away from him during this mechanic. At the same time, the 2 weapons he threw up will be dropping back down on the platform in areas indicated by 2 circle telegraphs. Players should avoid these areas as the boss will eventually leap onto each weapon to re-equip it and then do a heavy-hitting spin attack. Once he's picked up his 2 weapons, the fight will resume and all mechanics will repeat until the boss is down. In this next section, we'll chase a ferret through more trash mobs until we find out that he is actually the second boss, Kamaitachi. Whipping Witchrit is a heavy-hitting frontal attack with no cast time. Make sure you're not standing in front of the boss if you don't need to be. When the wind begins to howl, players will need to dodge a large donut-like attack by being either in melee range or at max range. The Patient Blade is a massive 180-degree attack that should be avoided. Standing near melee range can make this easier to dodge. When the wind shifts, a large column attack will dissect the platform. Dodge this is necessary. Whisper in the Wind will have the boss flying away to spawn 4 wind adds, a number of wind orbs around the platform, and 4 tornadoes that will travel in a circle around the outer edge of the platform. Stepping into any of these wind orbs will knock you back and deal damage. Periodically, the tornadoes will stop moving and form lines between them. These lines indicate where the boss will bounce between each tornado, obliterating anything in its path. The attack itself is much thicker than the lines may indicate, so players should make sure to move into a safe zone as necessary. You'll also need to dodge the smaller AoE attacks from the adds themselves. After 2 line pattern attacks, the boss will pick a tornado to slam down on, dealing proximity-based damage. Move away from this area to reduce damage. Now that the boss has returned, the rest of the fight will repeat until you win. The next section has more mobs with more AoE attacks to dodge. Make sure you take extra care with these snake adds as they have a very nasty cleave. These 2 mini-bosses are fairly straightforward as long as you watch out for and react to each AoE attack. The last boss is Genbu, better known as Turtle Yoda. He'll periodically hit the tank fairly hard, so be ready with those cooldowns and heals. Hell of Water will create a cross AoE attack that should be avoided. Hell of Waste will target players with this large circle AoE. The affected players should move away from others to avoid overlapping damage. When he casts Sinister Tide, you'll notice each tile of the platform will form a glowing arrow on it and a small blue orb will begin to flash on one of the tiles. This orb will then move in the direction indicated by the tiles until it hits the outer edge and disappears. Players will have to quickly determine the path of this orb to avoid taking excess damage and stacking vulnerability up debuffs on themselves. These mechanics will continue for a while until Genbu moves to the center and forms a shield around him, knocking all players back with Hell of Waves. The outer tiles of the platform will also periodically glow, and these should be avoided as necessary. Players will need to destroy the shield before the boss reaches 100 on his focus gauge, or you will wipe. At this point, the encounter will continue with increased difficulty and overlap of these mechanics. The principles remain the same though. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Up next, we'll hop into the Fractal Continuum hard. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time. Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for the Fractal Continuum Hard. This is one of 2 new dungeons made available by patch 4.2 in Final Fantasy XIV, Rise of a New Sun. You'll find yourself in a familiar area, taking a few minotaurs out of your life to get through it. My name is Magitek and I'll be your dungeon guide. The first section has a number of familiar trash mobs with the usual abilities. If you pull everything all at once, you may notice it can get a little hectic trying to dodge everything, but I believe in you. The first boss is the Mother Bit. Electrochemical transfer will revive these Magitek bits, and they will move around the platform in specific patterns before throwing out long column AoEs. They'll also target the main tank with a number of attacks, so be ready with shields and heals. Allagan Gravity will target the ground under a random player. Move out of the telegraph as necessary. Once the gravity puddle is down, make sure to stay away from it as it will pull in any nearby players, dealing damage and afflicting them with debuffs. The bits can also form in a straight line and begin to cast Citadel Buster. Players will have a very short time to move behind the line of bits before this line AoE forms. Stepping into this line will knock back and debuff players. A Citadel Buster deals a high to lethal amount of damage, so be sure to avoid this as necessary. These mechanics will repeat until the Mother Bit is down. The next area may seem a little familiar to you, but the trash mobs aren't really that much more challenging. The second boss is the Ultima Warrior. You'll notice that there are 3 statues of the Primal Zervan, Sophia, and Sephiroth around the room. Aetroplasm is a heavy-hitting tank buster. Get ready with cooldowns and heals. Citadel Buster will blast in the direction of a random player. If you notice the boss turning towards you, move out of the way. Cerulean Vent is an AoE blast that will also knock back players. Eventually, the boss will cast Primordial Aether and channel energy from one of the primal statues. Channeling Zervan will place either an infinite fire or infinite ice debuff on a player. Moments after, a fire and ice marker will appear on the platform. Players will need to stand in their respective elements to avoid damage. Shortly after, he'll cast Mass Aetherplasm, damage that must be shared among the group. Stack up before the blast goes off to avoid death. Channeling Sephiroth will mark up players with these green markers. These markers will eventually drop down green orbs that will slowly grow over time. Players will need to eventually stack up for another Mass Aetherplasm, so be careful not to box yourself in. Channeling Sophia will mark up players with black or white markers. Players will have to pair up and stack together with those of opposite marker colors, or they'll take damage and get afflicted with debuffs. At this point, the mechanics will repeat until the boss is down. In this section, if you are within line of sight of these angry jailed ads, they will attempt to break free and attack you. Some will break out immediately, but the ones that struggle to burst through can be avoided by running away. The last boss is the Ultimate Beast. When he raises his arm all menacingly, he'll cast Death Spin, hitting anyone in melee range. When he stands up, players will want to move directly into his hitbox to avoid the blast of Aether Vent. Flare Star will bring down a proximity-based damage blast that persists as a puddle. Players will need to move away to reduce damage while also spreading apart to avoid overlap of these black Allagan Gravity markers. Light Pillar will create an AoE attack in the center that will gradually move out from the center. Players will need to dodge in between these attacks as they grow to avoid excess damage. Boreborn Beasts will give the boss a damage up buff. Demi Ultima will do group-wide damage. Be ready with those shields and heals. Allagan Flare will target the tank, and players should move away to reduce damage. At this point, the mechanics will repeat until the boss reaches 5% and begins to cast a slow Demi Ultima Enrage. You'll need to destroy the boss before this cast goes off, or you will die. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Up next, we'll head into the Jade Stoa. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time. Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for the Jade Stoa Extreme. This is the new Extreme
collaborate easily no matter where you are with Vodafone Unified Communications. Search Vodafone One Net Business.
Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for the Jade Stoa. This is the new normal mode primal battle made available by patch 4.2 in Final Fantasy XIV, Rise of a New Sun. For real, this might be my new favorite primal. It really grabs your attention and slams your face in its awesomeness. My name is Ms. Tech and I'll be your dungeon guide. Storm Pulse will do raid-wide AoE damage and Heavenly Strike is a heavy-hitting tank buster. Be ready with cooldowns and heals. State of Shock will grab a player and then throw them across the platform. The rest of the raid group will need to run to their landing zone to soak the damage or the affected player will die. Immediately after, all players will need to move behind the boss to avoid leg sweep. The boss will then move into the center and cast Unrelenting Anguish. In this section, he will poop out a pattern of red orbs that will slowly make their way to the outside of the platform. Players will need to avoid these as necessary. He'll also cast Fire and Lightning in the direction of a player. This is a very large column attack that should also be avoided. He will then leap to the outer edge and cast another Fire and Lightning down the length of the platform as well. Eventually, he'll call down his tiger and disappear. Tanks, be sure to grab this ad right away. Small AoE circles will appear on the platform. Avoid this or you'll end up taking bleed damage. The tiger will then jump up and mark its primary target. Players should move away from this player to avoid death and reduce damage. The affected tank can also pop some cooldowns here to lessen the burden on the healers. Immediately after, another Fire and Lightning to dodge. The tiger will then leap to the center and begin to slowly cast the Roar of Thunder. You'll need to bring him down as low as possible to minimize the incoming damage of the roar. Once the cast goes off, all players will be afflicted with down for the count and be unable to move. You'll be lifted into the air and then dropped from a great height, where you'll need to dodge more of Byaku's orb shenanigans and AoEs, all while falling. Make sure you dodge as much as possible to avoid damage, debuffs, or even death. Eventually, you'll land back on the platform and Byaku will cast his ultimate. At this point, the fight will resume. In this phase, players will need to be on the lookout for this special lightning AoE attack. You'll notice that it'll spawn in 2 sets and then make its way across the platform to the outer edges. You'll have to dance around each lightning attack until they disappear. Getting hit by this attack will deal damage and apply paralysis on you. At the same time, players will also be marked with these orange markers, spread apart to avoid overlap. Next up is Distant Clap. Players will only have directly in his hitbox or at super max range to properly avoid this, so be ready. At this point, you've seen all of the mechanics he'll throw out at you, and you'll have to deal with them with increased difficulty and overlap. Apply the same principles, avoid AoE, and you'll have him down in no time. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Up next, we'll head right into the Jade Stoa Extreme. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time. you.